Hello everyone, I'm Tatya, and today we're going to talk about how the fall of the Ottoman Empire wasn't some random accident of history. No, it was a carefully orchestrated takedown by the West, which was designed to keep West Asia fractured, colonized, and exploitable. Let's get this straight. The Ottoman Empire didn't just collapse. It was taken apart brick by brick by European powers who wanted a weaker, divided West Asia they could control. Britain and France did not just achieve victory during World War I. They used it as a cover to redraw the map, pit communities against each other, and install their own interest at the expense of everyone who actually lived there. And no, this wasn't some accident of history. This was an intentional strategy. The point was to make sure West Asia would never be able to stand united again. And where was America? Waiting in the wings. The US came late to the imperial party, but by the time Britain and France were exhausted from running their mandates, Washington slid right in with its own playbook. Oil deals, military bases, and special relationships with Israel and Saudi Arabia. America didn't carve up the Ottoman corpse, but it inherited the whole colonial infrastructure, and it's been running the imperial franchise ever since. When the Ottomans sided with Germany in World War I, the Entente powers practically started drooling. They thought they finally had their excuse to finish off the Ottomans. Step 1, brute force. The plan? Bust through the Dardanelles, roll into Istanbul, and pop the champagne. Easy, right? Except no. What they got was Gallipoli, one of the most embarrassing face palms in military history. The Ottomans dug in, fought like hell, and sent the world's most advanced armies packing. Britain and France had strutted in like heavyweight champions and stumbled out like amateurs. So, plan B. If you can't kick the door down, destroy the house from the inside. They weaponized nationalism, stoking ethnic and sectarian divisions like pyromaniacs, tossing matches into a dry forest. Enter the Arab Revolt. Britain and France waltzed in like bad Tinder dates, whispering sweet nothings. Fight with us and we'll give you independence, a beautiful big Arab kingdom from Aleppo to Aden. Except, of course, they were already cheating behind everyone's back with secret deals. Because Britain's promises have the shelf life of milk left out in the desert sun. But Britain wasn't done. Oh no. They doubled down in 1917 with the Balfour Declaration, promising a national home for Jewish people in Palestine. Translation: let's ship Europe's Jewish problem somewhere else and wash our hands of it. And notice who never got a say in this grand gesture? Not the indigenous Palestinian Muslims or Christians, not even the indigenous Jewish communities already there. Nobody asked them how they felt about their homeland being gifted away like a wedding favor, because this was never about coexistence or justice. This was about planting a European-aligned settler colony smack in the middle of West Asia, a permanent wedge to keep Muslims divided, suspicious, and fighting among themselves. Why? Because history shows what happens when Muslims unite. They become an unbreakable mountain, a sledgehammer to invaders, protecting all their people from colonization and exploitation, regardless of ethnicity or religion. And that always stood in the way of Western imperial powers more than anything. After the war, the League of Nations, basically the West's rubber stamp, handed down mandates that legalized colonial control. Britain ran Palestine, France ran Syria and Lebanon, and both ran the show to their own advantage. But the chaos we see today, Israel, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, isn't some tragic accident. It's the design. The West doesn't want strong, independent nations in West Asia. They want borders drawn to divide ethnic groups, pit sects against each other, and keep the region dependent on foreign stability as they exploit the people and the rich natural resources of the region, because the West needs them in order to remain in power. Wake up, West Asia. Anyway, that is why Palestine was set up the way it was. Britain encouraged Jewish immigration while shamelessly sidelining Arabs, then flipped when it needed Arab oil. The goal was never peace. The goal was to keep both sides weak, fighting each other instead of turning against the colonial powers that oppress them and keep them weak, groveling lapdogs. By 1948, Britain was done cleaning up its own mess and happily shoved the whole Palestine problem onto the United Nations. Partition, war, Nakba, we know the headlines, but let's cut through the propaganda. Israel's creation wasn't a noble response to the Holocaust. It was the crowning jewel of a century-long imperial strategy, planting a European settler colony in the heart of West Asia to serve as a permanent Western outpost. And the irony is suffocating. After Muslim kingdoms and empires always left the gates open to Jewish refugees throughout history, the same Britain that slammed its doors shut to desperate Jewish refugees during the Holocaust suddenly reinvented itself as the midwife of Israel. Please. They don't fool anyone with half a working brain. Israel was a perfect strategy, so they thought. A Western-aligned, heavily armed state surrounded by fractured, colonized Arab nations. A guard dog on the colonial estate. A wedge to make sure West Asia never stood united, never threatened European or American dominance again. These psychopathic world politicians did not plan that most of humanity has a soul and love for each other. They did not foresee how much of the world would rise up against their tyranny and injustice. Thanks for listening.